Let's talk about Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. The New York Jets right now are 4-12 on the season. They are third in the AFC East division. And as we all know right now, they're not going to make the NFL playoffs. Just 3 months ago, at the start of the season, the New York Jets had Super Bowl aspirations with a returning Aaron Rodgers off his Achilles injury, and at the time with Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard. And you still had Robert Saleh being the head coach. But it was a lot of smoke to the fire. After they suffered their third loss of the season, there's a lot of reports that came out that Woody Johnson was not happy with the team at all, that he felt like they'd be better off in a different direction. But it was just a small report by The Athletic. After having a tough loss against the Minnesota Vikings in front of his friends in the UK, because Woody Johnson is a former ambassador for the UK, he would fire Robert Saleh. He did not talk with Aaron Rodgers. He did not talk with the then general manager Joe Douglas. He didn't talk with any executives. All these guys that you hire, Woody Johnson fired them himself and had security escort him out. No, you don't get to tell your team goodbye. See ya. Now, Robert Saleh was not a perfect head coach. The man was not a top head coach in the NFL, but they played hard for Robert Saleh. Those players, they love Robert Saleh, especially on the defensive side of the ball. He never got the offense right because Zach Wilson was his quarterback. Zach Wilson is a bust. And to go out there and to play defense of Woody Johnson, and trust me, it's going to be rare in this video that I'm going to defend Woody Johnson. Him and Joe Douglas did combine their heads together, and they were sold on Zach Wilson. And then Woody Johnson went out there and he saw the kid on his pro day and say, hey, let's go out there and let's take him. They took Zach Wilson. Unfortunately, he was a bust. Zach Wilson may find success elsewhere in the NFL, but that kid is just a terrible quarterback. He's horrible. Right now, he's a backup quarterback for the Denver Broncos. But this team has had a quarterback problem for many years now with Sam Darnold, who was a bust. Sam Darnold looked better with the Carolina Panthers, especially in the back half of that season with Steve Wilkes. He now is balling out with the Minnesota Vikings, but he looked completely terrible with the New York Jets. You may ask yourself why. Terrible management. And at the time, Woody Johnson did step away. This man became the ambassador for the UK. That's when Trump was the president. So his brother went out there and hired Adam Gase. You gave him a washed-up Le'Veon Bell. Just terrible management. And I look at this situation right now. Aaron Rodgers is a washed-up quarterback. Devontae Adams is an older wide receiver. Woody Johnson is the biggest reason why this team is in the situation that they're in right now. Let me use another example. Joe Douglas wanted to make a trade to bring in Jerry Jeudy. And I think a lot of you guys know where I'm about to go with this. Joe Douglas was fired just a couple of months ago, and all the reports are now coming out. Joe Douglas was overruled by Woody Johnson, and it's not because the physical went bad or because Jerry Jeudy has a bad attitude or he's a terrible player. Right now, he's balling out with the Cleveland Browns. Woody Johnson did not want him on the New York Jets because his awareness was too low on the Madden football game. We're making decisions based off a dumb football game. And no offense if you play Madden, but if you're an owner in the NFL, general manager, whomever, if you make important decisions at the NFL level, you don't ever use a video game to make those decisions, especially a dumb awareness rating. So they made a move to bring in Devontae Adams instead, and Devontae Adams is still a solid wide receiver to have on your roster. But they nixed the trade for Jerry Jeudy because his awareness was not high enough on a video game. Just a couple of years ago, Mike White was frustrated. He threw his helmet. And Woody Johnson said, yeah, you should throw your helmet. You suck. You're right. And then he came out and he apologized. Now, you guys know how I feel about this. You basically go out there, you dry snitch on yourself. If you apologize for something, therefore you did something wrong, or therefore you did something to offend said person. If Woody Johnson never apologized to Mike White, you can always go back and say, hey, he never said that, but he apologized to Mike White, and he confirmed that he did. You're in the locker room critiquing your players. I understand that you're the owner. That's the coach's job. That's the general manager's job to go talk with the coach and say, hey, what's going on with our quarterback? And by the way, Mike White was never supposed to be the starting quarterback with the New York Jets to begin with. Now, everything would have blown up in the locker room if Mike White would have looked at him and said, you know what? You're a terrible owner. This is why the team sucks. But hands off of that. Never blame Woody Johnson. Woody Johnson went out there, made a move to bring in Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers at the time was still a very good quarterback with the Green Bay Packers. He tore his Achilles last season against the Buffalo Bills. It was a season that went to hell. Zach Wilson had to be your starting quarterback yet again. But we all bring it over to this season, to where you have Robert Saleh at the time. You have Nathaniel Hackett as the offensive coordinator. You built this team around an aging veteran of Aaron Rodgers who's coming off a torn Achilles injury. And Aaron Rodgers did not look the same. He has not looked the same since he tore his Achilles. That last season with the Green Bay Packers, you did see a drop off, but Aaron Rodgers was very frustrated with the organization, and he felt like, hey, it was time to leave. So he walked out the door. They traded him to the New York Jets, similar to what the Jets did many, many years ago to bring in Brett Favre. But this situation is a bit different. You brought in the coaching staff that Aaron Rodgers loves, especially with Nathaniel Hackett. But Nathaniel Hackett was so damn bad that they basically relieved him his duties. They fired Robert Saleh. They let him go because he's the head coach. They didn't fire Nathaniel Hackett. They relieved him of his duties. He stayed with the team, which makes zero sense. And they let Todd Downing go out there and call offensive plays. And if you're a Tennessee Titans fan, you know this. Todd Downing is a terrible coach. Offensive coordinator, terrible position coach. Just horrible. And then you make a move to go out there and bring in Davante Adams. These are desperation moves because you're trying to still go out there and tell your fan base, we're doing everything that we can. We're making blockbuster moves to bring in Aaron Rodgers. We're making a blockbuster move to bring in Davante Adams. Unfortunately, this is not 2015. Both of those players are behind their primes. Now, I still believe that Davante Adams can be a very good wide receiver in the NFL for any team. The problem is this with Davante Adams. He loves to be on trash teams. Besides the Green Bay Packers, he's with the Las Vegas Raiders playing with Derek Carr. They were not a contending team. He wanted to leave the Las Vegas Raiders to go and either play with Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr. Two terrible situations. So you left one bad franchise in the Raiders to come over to the New York Jets, another bad franchise. A terrible franchise with your former quarterback and Aaron Rodgers, who you have a close relationship with. And if it wasn't going to be Aaron Rodgers, you wanted to go to the New Orleans Saints and play with Derek Carr because he was your college quarterback and he's one of your closest friends in real life. Makes perfect sense to me. But you don't want to go out there and contend for a ring. So I would never feel bad for Davante Adams if he never wins a championship because he chose these destinations. But you would think on paper with Garrett Wilson, with Davante Adams, with Aaron Rodgers, Breece Hall, that this team will go out there and contend for a championship. But instead, they are 4-12 because you fired your head coach. And let's just get something right. He did not have much confidence in Robert Saleh after last season. So I asked the question, why the hell would you bring him over to this season? Why not let him go after last season and bring in yet another head coach? But you wanted this man to go out there and basically see what he could do with Aaron Rodgers just for a couple of games. And that Minnesota Vikings game, that was not on Robert Saleh. The defense held up their part of the deal. And I do understand as a head coach, you have to go out there, you have to take care of business on both sides of the ball. You have to take care of offense and defense. Saleh is no longer the defensive coordinator with the Jets. You're now a head coach. Understand that. But the man's defense went out there and he did everything possible to win that game. But Aaron Rodgers threw a pick six in that matchup and threw the last interception to Stephon Gilmore. How the hell was that ever on Robert Saleh? How was any of this all on Robert Saleh? It's not. All of this was not all on Joe Douglas. This was all on Woody Johnson because he's the owner. And I'm taking up for these guys because I've seen other coaches being stuck in the same situation with Woody Johnson. And even with his brother's not any better. But you're making all those moves to bring in these veterans. You can have good players on your team. It doesn't mean that your team is good. And their defense has not looked the same since Saleh got fired. Ahmad Sauce Gardner has become a holding machine. He's given up a lot of big plays. He's not the same cornerback that he once was. This is why coaching is so important in the NFL, because it comes down to game plan, schemes, adjustments. Coach Brick is doing the best that he can, but this is a man that's not meant to be a head coach just yet. And I don't think that he ever will be a head coach in the NFL. He has coached majority of this season as being the head coach with the Jets, and it's been borderline terrible. Every single game, they continue to get worse. Yes, you beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL. You can't beat elite level competition. You lost to the New England Patriots just a couple weeks ago. So when I look at the New York Jets right now, they're just terrible. You have an aging quarterback, and there's a lot of reports they're going to move on from Aaron Rodgers. Therefore, you're going to bring in yet another quarterback. You're going to draft a quarterback maybe in the first round. Maybe you bring in a bridge quarterback. We'll see what happens in that situation. Your offensive line is still a major issue. Olu Fashanu, who they drafted in the first round this year. This kid got injured last week. He's dealing with a foot injury. The sky's the limit with him. But you have a guy that's never played guard before. You put him at the guard position in the NFL. This is a man that has always been a tackle, even dating back to high school, but you expect for him to play the guard position. That is not how the NFL works. Woody Johnson is playing This real life sport, like how you would play Madden. If you have a player that goes down in a Madden video game, you switch the guard over to tackle. Hey, he's an 86 overall at guard. He's a 91 at tackle. We should be okay. That is not how real life works. Put Olu Fashanu at the tackle position. Tyron Smith can't stay healthy, but you knew this when you picked him up in free agency. Joe Douglas did deserve to be fired. Robert Saleh was not the perfect head coach. You could have moved on from him. You should have did this before this season. It seems like he is shifting blame on everyone else except for himself. The New York Jets should not be this bad. To be 4-12 with the defensive talent that you have and with the offense that you have also. And say what you want to say about Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is not the same player that he used to be, but he's not a bottom of a barrel quarterback. You can still have him as a bridge option in the NFL. And I do believe that Aaron Rodgers will be a starting quarterback for a team next season. It just depends on what team. But Aaron Rodgers is definitely on the backside of his career. And this is a man, he deserves everything that he is getting also. Because he comes out, he's smug. When they had the win against the Houston Texans, he came out and say, hey, you know what? We can make a playoff push right now. You guys are just panicking. You're trying to go out there and say that we're trash, but we're not. Aaron Rodgers is so condescending towards the media. And he shifts blame on everyone else. And he has a lot of points that I actually agree with. But Aaron Rodgers comes out as this guy and he thinks that he deserves no blame. That's why I have a problem with Aaron Rodgers. Even dating back with the Packers, yes, he was nice to Jordan Love because Brett Favre was cold to him. He has a lot of redeemable moments. So I'm not going to come on here and just say that he's a trash human being. I don't think that's the case. I think that Aaron Rodgers is too big-headed and he has a huge ego. But you're not the same player that you once were. You deserve a lot of blame also. You wanted them to go out there and bring in Devontae Adams. I would never forget the Pat McAfee clip when they both went on there and say, hey, we can make a Super Bowl run right now. And you have Pat McAfee, that's his friend. He's going to take up for Aaron Rodgers. He comes out and he say, man, you know what? The Jets are dangerous. No, they're not. They're not dangerous to anyone. They got the doors beat off them by the Steelers that same week with Russell Wilson starting his first game with the Steelers this season. Their rushing defense has been abysmal. And look at the defensive talent that you have. Aaron Rodgers has failed the New York Jets. But even over all of that, Woody Johnson has failed the New York Jets and the New York Jets fan base. Because I will say this about the New York Jets and the New York Giants fan base. They're going to show up year in and year out. And this was supposed to be a Super Bowl contending team. But look at them now. Yes, you have injuries on both sides of the ball. But you have this talent. Rich is at the talent position with Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Breece Hall. And yet you have nothing to show for it but a 4-12 record. One of the worst teams in the NFL, one of the most disappointing teams in the NFL. When you look at the Tennessee Titans, you can make the case, hey, no one expected for them to be a Super Bowl contender. The same with the Cleveland Browns and other teams also. But with the Jets, historically, they have been terrible. But you look at the moves that they made. The expectations were higher this season. And I'm not going to let Woody Johnson off the hook. He deserves most of the blame here. And I expect for them to blow this roster up. It's a good chance that Garrett Wilson may be traded after this season. Garrett Wilson had some good moments, but he also had a lot of bad moments. The chemistry was never there with Aaron Rodgers. He had a lot of drops early in the season. And I will also bring this point back up with Aaron Rodgers. This is a man that missed portions of training camp because he had something else to attend to. No one else would get that grace with the New York Jets, but Aaron Rodgers did because he's Aaron Rodgers. And what has Aaron Rodgers done within the last decade? Yes, he won that Super Bowl many years ago against the Steelers. And he has a lot of MVPs. What has he done in the playoffs to help a team get over the hump? Even with the Green Bay Packers, they saw the writing was on the wall and they got rid of Aaron Rodgers. Everyone deserves blame. From Robert Saleh for hiring Coach LaFleur to go out there and try to develop Zach Wilson, which was terrible. From Joe Douglas drafting guys like Elijah Vera Tucker, bringing in bad offensive talent, guys that were not able to stay on the roster, even though Joe Douglas did a lot of good work with the Philadelphia Eagles. And who allowed all of this? Woody Johnson. But let me know in the comment section below, how do you guys feel about the New York Jets and how do you feel about this team moving forward and what should they do in the offseason? But to see this team be 4-12, they're just one spot above the New England Patriots. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless.